Hey guys, going into the greenhouse to do a little bit of work. I thought I'd show you guys what we're up to today. So we're gonna pot up some seedlings and we're gonna skip doing the peppers for now because they're all still pretty small and I think they're gonna be okay in their little containers for now. So here's how the peppers are doing. I don't really see any roots coming out the bottom when I was checking on them, and these are 4-inch pots, so they should be happy in here for just a little longer. Maybe in a couple weeks we'll come back and repeat the same process for the peppers into a 6-inch container. So going from a 4 to a 6, you can see the size difference there. We'll probably do that in a few weeks, but the ones that are in more desperate need of potting up right now are our cucumbers and our tomatoes. So if you check these out, we actually have little tiny cucumbers starting. I mean, these need to be potted up for sure. And thankfully, I did check on their bottoms as well. Let's see here. Here's a little cucumber here. I checked on the bottoms of these guys and they're really not coming out too bad either. There's a little bit of root starting to show though. So the goal with potting up is to get these guys put into larger containers before they become root bound. So we don't want them to get root bound in here. That's when their roots will start to grow in circles around themselves and basically bind themselves up, and which can restrict their growth in the future and kind of stunt them if they become too root bound. So one of the ways we prevent this, besides potting up when it's due time, but is also by starting them in these slightly larger containers. Honestly, I get a little bit lazy about potting up and I kind of dread it. We've been putting it off. That's why, if you can see, our tomatoes are quite tall. They needed to be potted up probably a week or two ago. But we put it off and it's just not something I look forward to doing sometimes. And so by starting them in these slightly larger containers, these 4-inch cups, it makes us not need to have that same urgency to pot up as quickly as if everything was started in like 6-packs. Like the basils are still fine because they're pretty small. But you can see like the basils are probably fine, but if we would have put cucumbers or tomatoes in those 6-packs, we would have needed to pot up like weeks ago. So that's what we're going to do today, and I just thought I would talk you through a quick example and process of what we're doing. So set that guy aside for now. And what we've got going on for our tomatoes. So we went ahead and we're going to transition them out of seedling mix. So this soil here is, I think it's a Garden and Bloom planting mix. I actually have it right out here. Let's see. Yeah, just a planting mix. So it's just garden soil. And so we're going ahead and transitioning them into something a little bit hardier and a little bit thicker, and because this has more nutrients in it than the seedling soil mix, you can tell it has some more texture. It's also not going to dry out as quickly. The seedling start mix that they were in before started to dry out really fast in this guy. I mean, you can see how dry this root ball is here of this one. And yeah, not too root bound, so you can tell even though this is a tall tomato, very tall tomato, it's not too bound yet, so that's perfect. So we caught it just in time. But anyway, so the more rich soil is going to give it a little bit more nutrients and make it not dry out as quickly and kind of better prepare it to go outside. I've had posts about sanitizing seedling containers. You'll see that some of them aren't as clean looking. These are actually all pretty clean looking, but I'm not as worried about making sure they're like super sanitized. You can if you want to, but at this stage it's not as imperative as when they're first getting started as seeds. Because if you think about it, these guys are now going to, you know, eventually be potted out into the garden in probably just like 3 to 4 weeks now. They've gotten past their initial, like, really sensitive stage. And so, you know, cleaning supplies is always a good idea, especially if you had any notable disease issues. But I'm not as worried about babying these guys now that they're big, they're doing well, they're mature, they're hardy. So putting them into this stuff, as long as especially this is fresh bag soil, we're not putting it into, you know, old garden soil. And then they're going to go in our garden anyway, so I think they're going to be okay. So for tomatoes are a little bit different. Same with brassicas, so like cabbages and kales and things like that, you can actually bury, and it's actually encouraged to bury part of their stem when you're potting them up. We don't want to do that for something like cucumbers and certain tender plants though, because this will actually rot if we bury it. So when we pot these guys up, I would add a lot more soil to the bottom, and maybe I'll do that example after I do the tomato. But for the tomatoes, we want to bury them. So if you look in here, I only put like just a little layer of soil in the bottom, and that is just so we can get kind of the bare minimum. so they're not just sitting right on the bottom. But then I'm just going to put this guy in there, and if you look from the side, you can see it's going to get buried probably at least up to there, which is great. That's the first stem, or I mean leaf. I actually pulled off the two little cotyledon, their little first embryonic leaves, like these guys down here that are kind of like purple. That's just from cold. I've already pulled those off of the other ones. So when you're potting up tomatoes, or when you're planting them outside, if I really had enough room here and I wanted to, I could remove this bottom leaf. But we'll just leave it and pot them up to here. And what the neat thing about that is that these tomatoes will actually put off new roots from that part of the stem. And so by, you know, setting it down below, yeah, we're not giving it a whole lot of soil depth below here, but we're giving it all this space to shoot off roots, not only from its current root ball, but to develop new roots from here. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in around here. Aaron's standing here so he can help me with an extra hand too. The greenhouse isn't really big enough to shoot like videos in here, so we're just doing what we can. But okay, you want to throw some in there too? We'll get it nice and full. Oops. Okay, and I should mention too that we did pre-moisten this soil. So we got it damp a little bit ahead of time, kind of like how we do when we first plant our, or start our seeds. Sorry, I keep whacking that thing. And so it's nice and full. I'm not going to compact it too much. I'm just kind of patting it level, and it'll sink down a little bit. But now you can see that is a happy potted up tomato. So it is going to have so much more nutrients and room for growth. And again, now it'll be just in here for maybe another 3 to 4 weeks before it goes outside. And we're going to get it watered here shortly in a minute. But that's basically potting up a tomato. And so we'll get that one out of the way. And then a nifty little trick I wanted to show you guys for like a cucumber. What are we going to put the cucumbers in, Aaron? A 6?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a 6-inch. So one of the neat things you can do, I'm going to put a little bit in the bottom. And then I'm going to take the same size container. I think that's about the right thing. The same size container the cucumbers are in. So they're in this 4-incher. You can actually set it in there and get an idea of what it'll sit like. And I'm like, oh, nope, that's actually a little bit too full. So then I can come back in here, take a little bit out, and then I can put this back in, and that looks a lot better. So what I'm gonna do is, if I can do this with one hand, is I create a little nest. And you can do the same thing when you're potting large plants, like if you buy a nursery plant and you're putting it into like a big terracotta pot or something. I can fill this around. And hopefully it'll stay and not collapse on me. But see, now I have all the soil around it. I can just pull this guy up. And now I have like the perfect little cup to put this guy in. And Aaron's gonna get us the cucumber. Oh, a little bit more root bound than the others, but not too bad. I'm trying to support its stem. And then I can just plop that down into the perfect size cup. Look how perfect that works. And then I can just fill in around the top just a little bit and kind of press it in and make sure I don't have any big gaps of space in there. And same thing, now this guy is going to get some water, he'll have more nutrients, and be happy in the greenhouse without getting too root bound for the next about 3 weeks before we get it outside too. It's kind of flopping over, but it needs support since cucumbers trellis themselves. We've just been kind of leaning them against the back of the greenhouse for now, and then we do have trellises once we get them outside. And I don't know, is that it? Do I need to say anything else about potting up?
No, that's about it.
That is about it. So we're going to go through the same process. These are probably fine for now, or basils. I need to trim these. Trimming alums, the onions, make them get thicker stems, so I need to trim those. But we're just going to go through and repeat the process for all of these tomatoes. We're actually not going to do all the tomatoes because we don't have room for quite this many tomatoes in our garden. So we're going to pick probably the strongest seedling, and then maybe compost ones that we're not going to keep, but we'll see. We want at least one variety of each that we started, and we started about 2 of each. And I'll write a post about this to accompany this little video, and happy gardening. Okay, we're not quite done, but I wanted to just give you a quick update before it gets dark, because I forgot to mention just a couple things. One was that whenever you are potting up, you want to try to go about double the size the container it's in. It's not always possible to get it exactly, but that's what we were able to do with the tomatoes. The cucumbers didn't quite double in size. They went from a 4 to a 6-inch pot, but again, they're only going to be in here for about another 3 weeks. If they were going to be in here for multiple more months, you know, like a full month to 2 months, and we probably would have done them all the way into the 8-incher as well. Another thing is that we didn't really worry too much about amending this soil or putting compost in it. It already is more rich than what they were in, which was the pretty, like, you know, mild, fluffy seedling soil mix. But what we are going to do is mix up a batch of this dilute seaweed extract. So we'll mix up some of that with some water, and then water them with that for their first time, and just do it nice and mild. So that will help prevent any transplant shock, and just give them a nice little feeding to get them happy in their new containers. And I think that that was it that I forgot to mention. And all the cucumbers are done now too over here. So I think everybody's going to be happy, and then we'll just repeat the process for the peppers in probably another few weeks, if at all. It just kind of depends on when we're going to get them outside. It would be a little bit pointless to do these if we were going to plant them out in just a week or two. So just depending on what the forecast looks like, we have really mild springs, so we might keep them in here on heat under the light until like mid-April. So in that case, then maybe in a couple weeks we'll put them into 6-inch containers. So just kind of depends on the timing. Because again, if you're going to be putting something out in just a couple weeks, unless they're real root bound, there's not really a huge urgency to put them into a bigger container at that point. Alright guys, check you next time. I'm going to go finish up the rest of these tomatoes.